All right, welcome everyone to a Friday episode of the Call Sheet Podcast here at the Fans First Sports Network. Friday means Hot Route. It's our Hot Route episode, and I got a great guest today from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, beat writer for the Pittsburgh Steelers and host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, Christopher Carter. Thrilled to get a chance to talk to him. Just saw him at the Combine, one of the hardest working men in show business. Welcome to the show, Chris.
What's up, Kevin? How we doing?
We're doing great. We're doing great. As I mentioned, Chris is a Steelers beat writer. We're going to talk some Steelers. We're going to talk some general NFL. But we always start our hot route with some get to know you questions about our guest. I'm going to fire a couple at Chris right away. All right, ready? All right, here we go. So, all right, Chris, I have the power to grant you an all expenses vacation to any destination on the planet.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Where are you going?
Any destination?
Any destination.
Oh, my goodness. Man, I don't know. I've always seen like cool things about Singapore. I always want to check that one out. I had a really good time in Thailand once, but I would want to go somewhere I haven't been before. I really enjoyed Ireland this past year. So maybe we have some really good friends in Ireland. So maybe I'd go back to Ireland and spend like a week there instead of working there and just actually get to spend time with them. So I think Ireland would be up there, Dublin. I've always wanted to see London or Paris. I've always also wanted to visit Ghana. I've heard some amazing things about there. I'm sorry. I'm just running through all the different things I could visit there. But yeah, I'd love to visit. There's a long list of places. You know what? I'll say this. Final answer: Tokyo. I've always wanted to go to Japan in the springtime when the cherry blossoms are blooming. I heard it's beautiful. I've always been fascinated by Japanese culture. So I'll go with my final answer: Tokyo.
All right, Tokyo it is. A good friend of mine from college went on vacation to Japan 30 years ago. Never came back. He's lived there ever since. Yeah. So all right, here you go. Question number 2. You only get to listen to one band or group or artist for the rest of your life. Who is it? Who we listen to?
Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's an easy one. Earth, Wind, and Fire is the greatest band of all time. They cover every genre. They go rock. They go R&B. They go soul. They have balanced for decades. They have some of the greatest albums of all time. They are the inspiration for so much music in today's world, and good music in today's world. I'm a former trumpet player myself, so I love big band sound. I love the I Am album, Can't Let Go, In the Stone. I could listen to Earth, Wind, and Fire for the rest of my life and never get bored.
It's funny. I got a friend who works over at a casino in Atlantic City. I live near Atlantic City. And he got comped to Earth, Wind, and Fire. This is going back, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. And he was like, "You want to come with me?" And I was like, "Oh man, aren't these guys super old now?" But I said, "All right, I'll go." It was awesome. They put on what a live show, man. I mean, you would talk about great musicians who command the stage. They were great.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, here you go. Question number 3. Ready? Mm-hmm. Give me a non-athlete who you have great admiration for.
Where do I start? I'd say, Barack Obama, one of my greatest heroes in life, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers. Man, there's a long list of people that fit that list. Rosa Parks. I'll say, my mom and my dad, they were fantastic in my life too. Like, I'm not just thinking historic figures, but there's plenty of people here. I like history. I like reading nonfiction. I like learning about people in the past. One person, some people don't know this about me. I went to law school. I graduated from Pitt Law. And one person who I read about, just a few books about, was Thurgood Marshall. And everyone knows Thurgood Marshall, first Black Supreme Court justice, and that's great. But Thurgood Marshall did so much before he was a Supreme Court justice. Like the fighting that he did at every turn of racism in every spot. When I learned about and the danger that he was under death threats. People tried to kill him several times. He was fighting in every little thing. Whenever there was a point where racism was used against Black people, whether it was trying to get jobs, whether it was trying to get housing, whether it was just even the smallest thing that, today people say, "Oh, that's DEI." Thurgood Marshall fought and won those battles at a time where you were more likely to be killed if you were fighting those battles. So if I was to pick one person, I guess for now, I mean, I could go on for years about that topic, but I'll say Thurgood Marshall. Go check out some of the books about him. He's a fantastic story.
Great stuff. You know, as a guy who taught history for 30 years and really went through the civil rights movement from the perspective of the courage that it took. And you're naming, you know, some of obviously the greats in the movement, but when you start talking about things like sit-ins and freedom rides and the courage of like 20-year-old kids who are anonymous to history, but to just, you know, put their lives on the line for that struggle is, you know, that's history, man. It's the story of common people doing extraordinary things. So great stuff, Chris. All right, but you know, hey man, you get paid for a living to cover the Pittsburgh Steelers in the NFL. Let's dive into that stuff. You know, you were just at the combine. Let's start with that. How much stock do you really put into what goes on at the combine in terms of evaluating players?
I think sometimes it gives you a better sense of who some guys really are athletically, because there's speed that you see in football and then there's speed that you see in track. And listen, running in football in shorts is not the determining of full-on speed, right? Like Antonio Brown didn't have the best 40-yard dash time, but he was, you know, sometimes untouchable when he got going in the NFL and, you know, in an actual game. But to compare that full speed against each other, to see how guys actually run, and also to see how guys trained to run, because that's another part of this is like if I know a guy who's really fast and should run a great speed but doesn't, then that's also a sign that like that guy didn't prepare for this. And preparation is everything. And if you're not preparing for this national stage where you're being evaluated and looked at under a microscope, what does that say about, you know, when I draft you and then pay you to then be, you know, and go into battle in these games for me? Those are the things that I look at. And so, you know, I don't know if I want to assign a percentage to it, but the combine to me is a good first look, because it's also not just how they perform on the field. It's also how they handle the podium, how they handle the interviews with the teams. The combine is meant to wear you down. I actually wrote a series following Konate Mumfield, Pitt wide receiver who got selected in, I believe, the 7th round by the Rams. And so we followed Konate from the end of his last season at Pitt to his training, to preparing for he went to the Shrine Bowl, preparing for the combine. At the combine, I think he got hurt in the combine. He had to run at Pitt's Pro Day. And so thing after thing after thing showing it there. But one thing that he kind of got a chance for us to illuminate in that series that I did last year for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette was it is grueling. They get you up super early. You're getting poked and prodded. You're getting tested. You got to do this. You got to be here. You got to do that. But it is all of that is to wear you down and to see if I can get this kid out of his element. What's he really like? Is he, because everyone's coming to, it's like when you show up for the interview, right? Like you come button up in a suit if you're trying to interview for a job, and you come up and you try to show your best self with your resume in hand, you try to give it, but employers like, oh, what's this guy really like? Is Kevin the kind of guy that's going to come out, give me this really great picture of himself, and then just disappear and then just not work hard, even though he said he would? And so the combine is the team's first real chance to kind of pull that out of players in their own terms. And I think that's the thing that you see the most of the combine is the testing, but also the relationships that get built, the reactions these players have to the long, grueling day that is the combine and how they take from that. So I put a decent amount of stock in that and how teams run. It always impacts my big board when I'm putting things together, how guys did there. And then, you know, I use that to feed other things and continue in my film study of players.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a grind for people on the media side. So you can only imagine, obviously, how much tougher it is, right, for the actual athletes. You mentioned the interviews. What'd you make of the blow up around Makai Lemon and his media sessions? And I mean, you know, some people were reporting, oh, he's been taken off of draft boards as a result of it. What'd you make of all that?
So the thing is that when I looked at those reports, they were all coming from like random Twitter accounts. I didn't see a bona fide reporter who is well sourced, has a great history of reporting inaccurate information, put that out there. I was right there when Makai Lemon was answering these questions. I didn't think twice that they were weird. I think the thing is that from that one camera angle, you know, he was talking like this and his eyes were a little red and he was like moving his shoulders and people didn't like how he did. And people were like, oh, I just don't like that. Oh, he's a diva. But when you listen to his answers, he was just giving normal answers. I think some people don't like the way that some people talk. I think that some people don't like dialects that aren't familiar to them. I think some people also thought like the way he moved his shoulders. I think there's some people that they called it, oh, that's sassy. And I think there's a little bit of homophobia in that because some people don't like it when a man, has a different inflection to things. But when you go through the content of his answers, I thought he was fine. Like I asked him, like, hey, what did you think about meeting Mike McCarthy and this, that, and the third? He's like, I was blessed. When I ask a man about meeting a legend and he doesn't talk about himself, he talks about how blessed he was to be in that person's presence. That's a person that tells me you're connected to God. And, I'm a Christian, so like, when I hear that, I'm like, okay, he's grounded in something there. And I think the people that are doing that, they saw this video, it went viral for funny reasons on Twitter. And then all of a sudden you see people being like, hey, like I heard that he was dropped by this. I asked people about that. I have not heard anything about him dropping off people's boards, and hey, you know what? Maybe there's people out there, there was the Dolphins many years ago said that Mike Tomlin was a hip hop coach and we don't want him there. So maybe there are some people that think that way. I would just not listen to those people because the Dolphins are still the Dolphins and Mike Tomlin, won a Super Bowl and is going to be going into the Hall of Fame at some point. So I thought that was ridiculous. I thought it was silly. I feel bad for Mekhi Lemon. I also feel bad for Casey Concepcion because his stammer was there. And, and I was sitting there. I was like, man, this is rough. Like there was at one point I was sitting there like, man, if I was his agent, I felt like I would have tried to do something to help him with this a little bit better. But like in general, like I see that stuff and I'm just like, man, where does that come from? And you know what? If Mekhi Lemon had a history of craziness, if he had, charges up against him, then I would understand it. And I'd be like, okay, there's something there. But when you look into Mekhi Lemon's history, and I do like my initial research on him, this is a guy who came to USC, as a top recruit, was promised to be a star wide receiver. He was forced to play defensive back. And in today's college football world, when I covered college football for Pitt for like I think 5 or 6 years, maybe more than that. In college sports in general, not just football, but also basketball and every other sport. When I don't get my way, I'm hitting the portal. Done. I'm going somewhere that's going to pay me. It's going to start me. I don't want to fight for nothing. I deserve to get my shot. Mekhi Lemon never left USC. He said, okay, you want me to play defensive back? I'll learn that. But I'm going to prove to you that I'm a wide receiver. And eventually he didn't not only prove that he was a wide receiver, he proved he was the wide receiver. And he was their top guy, even with a guy like Jacoby Lane, who's taller, maybe even faster. And, he's younger, but Mekhi Lemon was just that much of a dog. So I don't know. Am I going to believe the track record of USC people that said, man, that guy was loyal and he fought by our sides and he didn't leave even when the going got tough? Or am I going to believe a random Twitter account that says, I think he's a little too sassy and I'm going to make up a rumor here. I'm going to go with the track record of the player rather than the rumor of social media, because I think that's where so much toxicity comes from these days.
Interesting. You bring up Casey Concepcion. I was there for his media session as well. And you're right. There were times when it was uncomfortable, but I'm looking at him and I'm just trying to think from a coach's perspective. Here's a guy who is not ducking the adversity. Yeah. That had to be hard for him. And yet he stood there the entire time. He was patient with his answers. There were times where he might've gone 7 or 8 seconds before he could really get his thought out, but he didn't duck it. He fought through it. And I'm just thinking, as a coach, this is a guy who's been through some adversity in his life. I mean, as a public school teacher, I can tell you this. There are few types of kids who get picked on worse than those who stutter. Kids are ruthless in attacking a weakness. And when they see something like that, they go after it. And so that this is a guy who has dealt with adversity. And I would say, as an evaluator, if all things are equal between him and maybe another guy on my board, give me the guy who I think is just going to be tougher. And that impressed me a lot.
It impressed me. I agree. I liked the way how he handled it. He didn't let it bewilder him. And I was sitting there and I'm like, this guy, he's powering through. He's not apologizing for himself. I think there's strength in that. And so, I liked what I saw out of him. I think he's one of the better route runners of this draft class. I think the biggest question I have for Casey Concepcion is his drops. He had 7 drops last year. It was kind of rough. He needs to lock that in, but if he does, he could be one of the best receivers in this class.
Give me a couple of names of some guys who really impressed you, whether it was at the podium or on the field.
Well, on the field, Omar Cooper, Jr., the wide receiver out of Indiana, I thought he lit it up. I thought him running that 4.42 40-yard dash, him running the drills. I thought he really showed up and showed out. Deion Burks out of Oklahoma had the highest vertical, and I think he had the third fastest 40. Really, I think he boosted his stock quite a bit. I really, on the podium, I really like Zachariah Branch out of Georgia. Branch, to me, he's fast, he's small, he looks like a Zay Flowers type. He looked like he'd be a great returner, but I don't see him get enough separation downfield. A lot of his getting open is on pop passes and screens, and I'm like, I'd want someone who can be more developed as a route runner. But as far as talking to him, truly impressed. I thought he composed himself very well. I thought he was very grounded. I liked the way that he answered questions and took on even the hard questions, at least at the podium. Other positions, I thought Dylan Thieneman he made himself some money. To me, Dylan Thieneman, I was like, second round pick, maybe high second round pick. Nah, he's first round pick. Like that's a guy out of Oregon who's, when you run a 4.35 and you play safety the way he does, that man gonna make some money. So I thought he did himself well. Kamari Ramsey, a guy who I was actually kind of worried about his speed, I thought did well. AJ Halsey out of LSU, another guy that I think he didn't have the greatest speed, but his physicality and his size, I think, will really work for him. So he was another guy that I think really did well for himself. Colton Hood. I think Colton Hood is one of the more underrated players in this draft class, because I think he might be the third or second best cornerback in this class. And I loved watching him at the Senior Bowl. When I went to the Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl a few weeks ago, and like I was still just getting to know a lot of these guys. I was like, okay, I looked at this, I looked at that. What this guy seems cool. And then I'm watching these guys practice against each other, and like Colton Hood, to me, he was my top corner at the Senior Bowl. And Kevin, I'm just watching this guy lock people down time after time. And he got beat once or twice, but he always kept his head up. When I talked to him, he seemed like he had it well together. I liked the way he handled himself. And then, at the combine, I talked to him again, same kind of, well put together guy, ran well with a 4.44 40-yard dash. I love Colton Hood. I think if the Steelers were to go get that guy, I think that they would need to trade back to get the right value for him in the first round. But I think Colton Hood should go in the first round. If he doesn't, he'll be a steal in the second.
All right, good. You brought up the Steelers. Yeah, let's turn our attention there. Obviously, you have a lot of access to the Steelers that fans would love to hear about. I'll preface this by just dropping some recent NFL news. Arizona Cardinals announcing they're going to move on from Kyler Murray. He'll hit the market basically as a veteran minimum player, since Arizona is going to pay all of his contract, the $36 million he's owed. So I think you can get him for about $1.3 million most likely this year. Any interest between the Steelers and Kyler Murray?
I think there's a kicking of the tires. I think that Kyler Murray has, he's in his 20s. He's a former first overall pick. The biggest thing that I think gets in the way is, something that Omar Khan said when we were talking to him at the combine. He mentioned AFC North quarterback. Are you an AFC North quarterback? And what does that phrase mean? To me, that means, are you going to be able to deal with the elements? When it gets cold and it's wintry, and in Pittsburgh, in Cleveland, in Baltimore, in Cincinnati, and it's get to the playoff times, it's win the division time. And when defense is hitting you hard, the way that Roquan Smith does or Myles Garrett does, where are you? How do you stand in it? How do you handle it? And when I look at Kyler Murray, last 5 years, he's played 2 seasons where he's taken at least 14 games. He's had 1 whole season. Most seasons, he's missing more than half the year. And to me, that's the worry that I'd have is, can he take that kind of a beating in the AFC North? I don't know that he can, but that's the thing. I would bring him in. I'm not avoiding him. You look at what Sam Darnold did just this past year, switching from the Vikings to the Seahawks. And granted, it looked better on the Vikings than Kyler Murray has looked in the Cardinals, but the Cardinals are just dysfunctional organization. I'd be willing to look at it. But I also got to know, what's going on behind the scenes between Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers, because, what everyone was saying, at the time, like, oh man, they're waiting until June for Aaron Rodgers. There was an agreement between those two sides that they were going to do that he was going to take his time and then eventually show up in June. It was not a surprise to them that he just said, oh, I'm signing in June. That was always the plan. Is there a plan right now for Aaron Rodgers? We don't know. Maybe we find out after the fact, but That's why I like some things about Kyler Murray. I just don't know if he fits what the Steelers are trying to do at quarterback right now because of his size, because of his injury history, and if that's worth the gamble there. Granted, a vet minimum contract, tough to lose that bet, right? Like, be like, oh, well, we missed there. Time to draft a quarterback next year. But that's the question I think the Steelers have to explore is how durable and how fitting would he be in what Mike McCarthy's trying to put together.
Do you put much stock in the idea that the Steelers could potentially land on Will Howard as the quarterback of the future? I mean, you read these things about that the new staff is said to really like him. But he didn't even take a preseason rep last year.
Yeah.
And so when you set up the quarterback situation for 2026, like where does Will Howard fit in?
Will Howard is the young quarterback that I'm seeking to see how he develops in camp. I'm not avoiding a quarterback for Will Howard. I am not banking on Will Howard to become a franchise quarterback. Listen, I was one of the people that said that, they should go get Will Howard last year. And I even thought in the 4th round instead of the 6th. And so this isn't me who thinks that, they just shouldn't bring him. I like Will Howard, but I liked him as the future Mason Rudolph. I liked him as the guy that has the traits that, hey, if things work out, he could be a solid backup for you for some years. But sorry, I think that if you're the Steelers right now, you bring him in, you let him battle out with Mason Rudolph and whoever else, is in your quarterback room. But I got to see how he plays, because the Steelers know how he practiced. Well, I guess this coaching staff doesn't because they weren't here. But let's see how he does. I think that having him in the fold is important, but planning around him shouldn't hinder you from going after another quarterback. Excuse me.
No problem. Do you think the Steelers know right now? I mean, here we are, early March, and do you think that the new staff knows what direction they want to go in at quarterback, or is everything just so fluid right now that it's too murky to understand?
I think the Steelers are waiting for the thing that got them Ben Roethlisberger. I think they're waiting for a strong class where there's multiple quarterbacks that are projected to go in the first round that they can get their guy of that group. I think that is their plan because that's what's worked before. They're an organization of tradition. They're an organization of history, and they figured, let's do that. Because when I look back throughout NFL history, and I know because a lot of people, Kevin, and I guess I want to ask you your opinion. A lot of people say, should the Steelers tank? Should they just go up, be really bad so you can go up and get the best quarterback possible, the first quarterback off the board, and draft them? I want to hear what's your philosophy on that. Are you in the boat that the Steelers should tank, just get the highest quarterback at some point, and then just rock out with that?
I never believe in tanking. I don't think that tanking. I just think culturally, it creates a slippery slope. I don't think you can ever, as a coach, stand in good faith in front of a room of men, and not demand the best out of them and the best out of yourself. I don't understand how you can possibly do that. Now, maybe it works in the NBA where you have, a superstar or two can so tilt a franchise's, fortunes. But in football, man, where you need 11 together working as one on every play, it for me, I would not be able to do that in good faith.
Do you know? So I'm glad you said that because that's the way I feel like. You don't tank. You don't try to lose to get a higher pick because it also often doesn't work.
Right.
Who is the last quarterback? And this is a trivia question. And this is for you at home listening or viewing this show. Who is the last quarterback that was the first quarterback selected in his draft class that won a Super Bowl as a starter for the team who drafted him?
Well, the name that leapt right to mind was Peyton Manning. Now, I don't know.
That is the most recent such player, and he was drafted in 1998.
Right. So, wow. So, that's wow. Yeah.
You're talking about almost 30 years of people picking the first quarterback off the board, and it doesn't work for them. And again, like there's some people probably saying, well, wait a minute. What about Matt Stafford? He won a Super Bowl with the Rams. What about Eli Manning? He was drafted by the Chargers. He was traded for. And then you could go back even further than that. The guy before Peyton Manning was Troy Aikman, for the Cowboys. And then before that, the next one would be Terry Bradshaw in 1970. So since the merger, there's been 3 quarterbacks who've been drafted first overall, or not first, but the first quarterback off the board, who have become, who have won a Super Bowl for the team that drafted them. And you look back at Peyton Manning's Super Bowl, he in that Super Bowl run, he wasn't the guy that drove them to the defense, drove them to that Super Bowl. They played fantastic down the run there. You look at what Bob Sanders and Dwight Freeney and that crew was doing. They very much carried the Colts through that playoffs. And that's not to say don't draft a good quarterback. But what I'm saying in that is that the idea that the Steelers should tank is not based on any historical accuracy. I think the people that want that don't know what they're talking about. And so if the Steelers have a plan moving forward, it's to continue to build, because what made the Steelers Super Bowl champions with Ben Roethlisberger wasn't just Ben Roethlisberger. It was that they brought Ben Roethlisberger into a building team that had a lot of weapons on it. It had a robust offensive line with Alan Faneca, Jeff Hardings, with Marvell Smith. It had Jerome Bettis, Willie Parker, Hines Ward, Plaxico Burress, Antoine Randall. It had stars on offense. And then it had a killer defense that said, hey, Ben, if you don't get it done, they're going to protect you. They're going to give you more possessions to go and win the football game. And then when Ben won his second Super Bowl, the Super Bowl that I think was his best, was the Super Bowl 43. It was that defense that was built around him. It wasn't just Ben Roethlisberger. Yes, he made the great throw to Santonio Holmes at the end of the game, and that was fantastic. But without James Harrison's pick 6, without Larry Fitzgerald being shut down for 3.5 quarters, Ike Taylor held him from being able to catch a pass. There is no Super Bowl 43 miraculous drive for Ben Roethlisberger. And so that's what the Steelers are doing now. They are building every step of the way to have a more complete roster so that when they do find that quarterback, whether it's Arch Manning, Jaden Mayava, Dante Moore, Julian Sayin, Lenore Sellers, whoever you like that's supposed to come out in 2027, because it's not in this class. I'm not a Ty Simpson guy, and I'm not a Drew Allen guy. I'm not none of these guys. But if you look at that 27 class and you get a run of 5 or 6 guys that could be a first round, that's what Omar Khan is circling and saying that's what we're trying to get right now.
Interesting. So that's pretty much what we should anticipate throughout the offseason, whether it's the draft, free agency, trades, etc. Your roster building so that when you land that quarterback, you're ready to roll, as opposed to, all right, now we have the quarterback, now we have to get everything else.
Yes, exactly. You it's better to have the situation, because here's the other thing is that, the model that like the Chiefs kind of ran into when the Chiefs drafted Patrick Mahomes. By the way, they were the 27th. They had the 27th overall pick naturally that year. They traded up from that because they were the number 2 seed in the AFC. They did not tank to get Mahomes. When Patrick Mahomes came, he came into a situation where, hey, we got stars, we got players, we got defense, let's rock. And he came into a situation where he just he was a great playmaker, but he was on a rookie deal, and that allowed the Chiefs to go be aggressive, and that built their run that they had. That's what made the Chiefs a dynasty, not because Patrick Mahomes came in and he was just good by himself. They had great players around him. And I think that's the sweet spot that everyone should be trying to organize right now. I think the Patriots, looked like they were close to having that around Drake May this year. But having something that the young quarterback comes into, he's the playmaker, he's the gun, but he has weapons around him. And then while he's on his rookie deal, you can get aggressive and say, hey, let's get that D tackle we're missing. Let's get that corner we're missing. Let's get that safety. Let's get that receiver that we normally wouldn't be able to spend upon if we have a franchise quarterback, but this time we can because he's on a rookie deal. To me, that's the sweet spot the Steelers are looking for. And then when you sign him to that big contract, you're hoping you develop him to a point where you have he propels you up so that you can win with the guys that you're putting around him. Interesting.
All right, I'm going to get you out of here on this. What's your impression of Mike McCarthy so far? Right, first new head coach in 2 decades in Pittsburgh. Wow. Not the guy that most people anticipated. Obviously, a lot of people not happy with it when it happened. I was a little more in favor or supportive of the hire, I think, than many people. You've had a chance to talk to him, I'm sure. What's your impression?
I like Mike McCarthy. I think he seems like a good person. He's historically a good coach. I think he puts things together well. I think that his understanding of Pittsburgh, I think, is very appealing to the Steelers. Like, this is a guy who, he knows Greenfield, like, the Zabar Huffs that was classic to that area that he knows about. Mike McCarthy, I think, is very much, he understands a lot of that. I think that's something that's of true value. And so I think that's something the Steelers absolutely like about him. What I like about him, historically, he's put together good offenses. He's known how to work a staff. He knows how to build a staff. I like Patrick Graham as a defensive coordinator. I've talked to several people who worked with him, the guy coming from the Raiders to be the DC There's a lot of people who tell me, Chris, you got a good one. The Steelers are going to be in a good place with Patrick Graham. And if I think the big thing with Mike McCarthy that I ask that I don't know how he's going to handle is how does he develop a quarterback? Because he inherited Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Dak Prescott. He has never had to draft the guy. And I think that's going to be the big thing that I want to ask him at some point. When we get more time is like, what would it mean to you to draft a guy like that? And to build him, because he's inherited the guys and he's built them up, and he's helped them be better. But I wonder what that's like, because that's the task that's in front of him. The Steelers, I do not think, unless Will Howard turns out to be the guy, unless he is the guy, maybe I've been wrong, and maybe he's not a backup, he's an actual franchise quarterback. Certainly they're talking him up, but you talk up your players all the time. You try to inspire them, and I think that's a good thing to do. But for me, Mike McCarthy, I'm impressed, but I want to see how he does with building an offense without an established franchise quarterback who can distribute the ball all around the field. That'll be interesting to see.
Chris, this was great. I love the insight is excellent. Really appreciate your thoughts and your opinions, and thanks so much for taking the time this morning.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Locked On podcast, right, Chris? When's that air?
Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you want to get more of Kevin's work. But go check us out on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there Monday through Friday. We usually try to get the episode up by midnight going into the day. But if you're a person you love commutes, we get you through your commute with a 30 to 40-minute episode every day, Monday through Friday. I also write at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Go to post-gazette.com to subscribe to my work there. And I also do the North Shore Drive podcast for them. Same way you get Locked On, same way you get Kevin here, you can get me there. So I'm everywhere. You can also follow my work online at Carter Critiques on your favorite social media app.
Excellent. Great stuff, Chris. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. So that's our Friday Hot Route conversation. Really great insight from Chris Carter. We'll be back Monday morning for our Monday morning GM show. Until then, hope everybody has a great weekend. Take care.